I was shocked to find out that Norway, which is this amazing, highly developed country belonging to Scandinavia, could actually be brutal, almost evil in some ways. I watched the movie Mrs. Chatterjee vs. Norway. Spoilers ahead, by the way. The movie showed that some institutions in Norway were willing to destroy a family for money. Here's what happened. We see that an Indian couple is living in Norway with their two little kids. Some outsider reports to authorities that there is domestic violence in the family. Husband hit the wife. When Norway Child Welfare Services hears about it, they have a concern for the kids. Is the home a safe environment for the little kids? So two agents from the welfare services start monitoring the family very closely. This goes on for months. At the end, one day, without telling the parents, they just took the children away. They concluded that the home is not safe for kids. Here are the reasons that they gave. Of course, it starts with the domestic abuse reports that there is domestic violence. Then the mother was feeding the children with hands. The parents were sleeping in the same bed as children. Husband is not contributing in the house. The parents are not fully involved with child studies. The mother shut the door while the child was crying. The child seems to be on autism spectrum, and they believe that the child will not get proper care in this family. And when they take the children away and the mother fights back, they declare that she's of unstable mind and she's not fit to be a mother. When you hear these reasons, they're not that extreme, and some of them are simply just cultural differences, like feeding children with their own hands. So this doesn't make sense. How can they take the children away for such reasons? Later in the movie, we find out that the real reason was corruption. They were doing this for money. Apparently, when the child welfare services, they take away a child from a family into some foster home or institution, the government actually allots hundreds of thousands of dollars for the care of the child. And everybody involved in this, the lawyers, the teachers, and of course the agents of child welfare services, everybody gets paid. So this innocent family just falls victim to this corruption scandal in Norway. Sounds horrible, right? Well, we all know that corruption of any kind, anywhere is bad. So I wouldn't focus too much on the corruption part. I'm a family therapist and I'm going to be answering some deeper, very important questions. First one, can a government just take away children in the name of child safety? What about the parents' right? Second, should a developed nation be allowed to suppress behaviors and lifestyles from another culture? And finally, I'll also share my complex verdict on Norway as a country. Now, before I answer those questions, let me first tell you the reality behind Norway Child Welfare Services, Barnevernet. Yes, that's the name of the organization. So the first question is, what does Barnevernet actually do? Well, as the name suggests, it is responsible for child welfare in Norway. It actually helps the children in two major ways: support measures and care measures. They seem like similar words, but they have very different meanings. Let's understand both of them. In support measures, basically, they help the family while the child still stays with the parents. And what kind of help? Things like counseling, advice, external support contacts, access to daycare, etc. Now, what are the care measures? Care measures basically come when Barnevernet decides that the family is no longer fit to take care of the child. So they go and they take the children away from the family and they put the children in foster families or institutions. Now, what's the difference in these two? In foster family, the child actually does get parents. It is like a private family who wants children. And the institutions are like residential care, where children stay in a group and they have professional caregivers for day-to-day care and well-being of these children. Now, can you guess, in Norway, overall, how many children get any kind of involvement from Barnevernet? And out of that involvement, how many cases are for support measures and how many for care measures? Let's find out. So let's assume this is the total population of Norway children. So among them, overall, 3% of all children, they receive some measure from Norway Child Welfare Services. Now, among those 3%, about 60% get support measures. And then 16% get care measures where the children are taken away, but this happens with the consent of parents. And finally, the remaining 24%, they get care measures which are forced, where parents do not agree, but the child is still taken away from the family. And as we all know, in this movie, the children actually belong to this category. They were forcefully taken away. And just to put a number on things, overall 6,000 children got care orders with consent and 9,000 got care orders which were forced. So 14 to 15,000 children were removed from the families. But what are the reasons that they give behind their actions? Let's take a look. The major reasons involve lack of parenting skills, parents' mental problems, high domestic conflict level, and parents' drug misuse. These are the reasons for both support and care measures. Now we see that Norway does have their reasons for taking children away. But still, if you think about it, overall 9,000 children were taken away forcefully. The number sure is small, 0.7%, but maybe it should be even smaller. And this is why historically Barneverne did get a lot of criticism. They are criticized on two main issues. One is that they are too slow. They detect too few cases. And the second criticism is when they do detect cases, they take very harsh action. They take custody too easily. So basically, slow to take action, but heavy-handed when it does. That's why they have often been challenged in higher courts. In total, European Court of Human Rights have by 2019 accepted 26 separate hearings against Norway for the activity of its child welfare agency. 26. And out of those, Norway has been defeated more than a dozen times. They even got a critical letter from professionals. 170 leading professionals, including lawyers, psychologists, and social work experts, they wrote a letter to Children's Minister of Norway, and they called Barneverne a dysfunctional organization which makes far-reaching errors of judgment with serious consequences. Let's hear what a Norwegian psychologist had to say. Einar Selvesen, I hope I'm pronouncing the name correct, probably I'm not, and this is what he said. There is lack of what I'd call the human factor, a lack of empathy, really providing an atmosphere so people can learn. It's more like police interventions, more like we have to find out what's wrong with you. Basically that they're not really coaching parents, they're just punishing them. And this is what he said in a CBN News interview. You need to close down all the offices. It's 400 offices. It has become a system of evil in too many cases. And finally, the most relevant criticism for today's topic, bias against other cultures. So there is a cultural clash in Norway versus some other countries. So in Norway, they treat children as legal subjects. But some cultures regard children as the sole responsibility of the family. And that's why there is this ideological difference between immigrant families and Norway Child Welfare Services. And children with a foreign mother are 4 times more likely than other children in Norway to be forcibly taken from their families. Now, this is probably going to make other cultures angry. Even as Indians, we might feel that we must have equal right to do what we want. I mean, it's not like we are dying in India. We are the biggest population. We know how to live. We know how to produce children and parent. Just let us be. Don't interfere. So now we come to the big question I raised in the beginning, that should a country suppress behaviors, lifestyles from another country? The basic answer is no, it should not. Just let people be. Everybody has entitlement to their own freedom. Only take action if something extreme is happening. But then the next question arises, who decides extreme? And this brings us to the philosophical question, who decides what's right or wrong? Who decides what's moral, immoral? And between India versus Norway, who's more moral? So I'm going to start with the question, what is the basis behind moral progress? So here we have two humans, human 1, human 2. And these shapes around these faces, these represent the health, happiness, freedom of these two humans. What we want is, with time, their health, happiness and freedom should increase. So for example, human 1 enjoys rock music and human 2 enjoys reading. They should both be able to do what they want. But with time, we could run into some problems. When people are just running free, one person's freedom may clash with somebody else's. Like in this case, the human 1 and human 2, let's assume they are neighbors. Now human 1 wants to just play rock music all day at really loud volume because that's what gives him that kick. But human 2 just wants to read and he wants to focus and concentrate and the music is disturbing him. So now we have conflict. Now this conflict needs to be resolved, and it is resolved through government laws plus cultural norms. And in this case, in India, the rule is in the residential areas, you can have 55 decibels of noise in the day and 45 decibels in the night. Now, as long as the person playing the rock music follows this rule, both of them can continue to enjoy rock music and reading on their own. And this right here is moral progress. So basically we see that two things are happening here. The personal freedom is increasing, but the freedom to disrupt others is decreasing through laws and norms. But then there is another tension that we must address, which is the tension between humans versus laws and norms. What if the laws themselves turn out to be bad? So as a country goes on its journey of moral progress, there is always this tension between the population, the individuals, and the laws and norms laid out for the whole population. So how does moral progress happen in this case? So let's first divide this individual freedom in two categories. There is good freedom And then there is bad freedom. Good freedom basically involves the freedom to do what you want. Again, listen to music, read books, travel, sleep late, wake up late, eat what you want. And within good freedom, there is also pro-social freedom, which is the freedom to connect with others, make bonds, love, help, cooperate, etc. And bad freedom is the anti-social freedom. This is the freedom to hurt others, disrupt others. And it also includes freedom to hurt yourself. The same way government laws and cultural norms, they can also be divided in good laws and bad laws. Good laws are the ones which ensure peace, justice, productivity. They ensure people's rights. They come through reasoning, problem solving, debates. They keep human well-being at the center. Bad laws, they hurt peace. They take away people's freedom unnecessarily. They're often unfair also. And these bad laws are often coming from superstition, tradition, religion, bad political ideology, or sometimes just personal whims of leaders. Now let's say if this was a country with this ratio of good freedom, good laws, bad laws, how would moral progress happen here? Let's take an issue, gay marriage, which has historically been banned. As the cultures grow, they realize that banning gay marriage, allowing only heterosexual people to marry, seems to be an unnecessary bad law. So they loosen the law, and ultimately it leads to good freedom of people, and now gay people can marry. And in several parts of the world, this is now allowed. So what we see is good freedom increases, bad laws decrease. Another one, using children as labor. People feel that they are free to use children as labor, and that's actually bad freedom because you are actually hurting the child's right to take education, to basically develop in a holistic way. So they ban this freedom, laws are tightened, and this actually turns into a good law. Child labor not allowed. And here we see the good laws are increasing and bad freedom decreased. Women wearing shorter clothes. Traditionally, it has been banned, it has been looked down on, but then a progressing country realizes that this is actually a bad norm. Women deserve the freedom to wear what they want. They're not hurting anybody. So again, the laws and norms are loosened, and that turns into good freedom. And again, we see good freedom increased, bad laws decreased. Now, in a country with underdeveloped traffic rules, people just drive mindlessly however they want, and they feel, oh, I'm free to do what I want. I can take left, right, however I want. I don't have to stop. I can speed up, slow down the way I want to. But then they realize that this is bad freedom because people are now getting into accidents. There are injuries and deaths. So laws are tightened, and this random driving is banned, and ultimately they make lanes. So you have to drive in your own lane. And here again, good laws and norms increase and bad freedom decreased. And this right here is moral progress. But the next question is, what's the proof that it's actually progress? The proof is that ultimately the health and happiness should be suitably affected by this moral progress. So we can say those freedom and laws as a cause and the health and happiness of the population as the effect. So if the good laws and good freedoms are increasing, the effect should be that health and happiness should also increase. Similarly, if there is more bad freedom and bad laws, the effect should be that the health and happiness of the population on average should decrease. So now let's compare two countries, okay? Country culture 1 and 2. Here we're going to see that each country or each culture will have its unique mix of good laws, good freedom, bad freedom. So let's say this country has reached this stage in their moral progress, but another country may have reached this stage. And when people from country 1 go to country 2 or vice versa, they get moral shocks. What's happening here? So now from a neutral point of view, we can say that this country culture 1 has made lower moral progress and this country culture 2 has made higher moral progress. And again, I repeat that this should be confirmed in the health and happiness of the population. So where the progress is lower, the health and happiness should be reduced, and where the progress is higher, the health and happiness should increase. And we should be able to see that in the data. So now if I ask you, which of these two countries is India and which of these is Norway? What would you say? Let's actually look at the effect first, which is the health and happiness in both of these countries. Let me pull up some data on Norway and India. We've been talking a lot about freedom, so let's look at which country is more free. These are the civil liberties rating of 2021. Lower ratings indicate more liberties. Norway's rating is 1 and India's rating is 4. Now I was talking about health and happiness. Let's look at some health data. So this is the Healthcare Access and Quality Index. 100 is best. So Norway scores 90.5 and India scores 44.8. Another health metric, life expectancy. Like this is the best one, right? If you're living longer, you're probably healthier. So in Norway, the life expectancy is 83.2 years. In India, it is 67.2 years. Next, let's see happiness and mental health. We'll start with the most extreme metric, suicide death rate. So in Norway, there are 10.5 deaths per 1 lakh people from suicide, and India, the number is 14.1. This is not exponentially high, but still higher. Now let's look at share of people who say they are very happy or rather happy. So in Norway, it is 96.39%, and India, it is 80.52%. And another one here is self-reported life satisfaction. So Norway is at 7.32 and India is at 4.04. So much less life satisfaction than Norway. So we've seen health and happiness. Let's look at some more metrics which are kind of correlated. So this represents violence, the homicide rate. So here we see in Norway, there is 0.57 homicides per 1 lakh people, and India, it is 2.95. Like more than 5 times. Another metric for violence, share of women who experienced violence by an intimate partner. So this tells us about family dynamics also. So in Norway, 5.2% women faced domestic violence, and in India, it is 18.1%, more than 3 times. And finally, Norway has been accused of corruption. So let's look at the Corruption Perception Index. Here they check transparency, how transparent the government has been. So higher transparency is better. So Norway scored 84 and India scored 41. So basically in every metric that matters to health, happiness, well-being, Norway is a lot better. So we have to conclude that Norway has made higher moral progress. So now if we ask the question again, should a country suppress behaviors or lifestyles from another country? Now I would say yes, they are allowed to suppress technically. Because think about it, why would a country which has made higher moral progress allow behaviors that they consider are morally inferior? See, technically even in India, we also preserve our own moral standards, right? We recently banned triple talaq. Now if somebody from Middle East comes to India and says, no, it's my culture, let me do it. Why are you stopping me? Can we allow it? No, we cannot, because we know that it's unfair to women and it hurts their well-being. So each country and culture technically have the right to enforce their own morality and hopefully their better morality. But then you can say, all right, enforce your own morality, have your own rules, but can you just take the children away like that? The answer to the question is yes, in extreme conditions, children should be taken away. Here I want you to understand that child abuse is real. Let me show you some examples. A father and his girlfriend were found guilty of starving and abusing a 13-year-old boy. They once locked the boy in a closet for a month, and they would not even feed him properly. The boy once said that he had to eat toothpaste to stay alive. The father says he has no pity for him. The boy was once handcuffed to bed for 3 days, and that wasn't the only time. Another one. A 26-year-old father abused his 21-day-old daughter, an infant. He said that he wanted to squeeze the baby tightly, and he did. And he squeezed the child with so much force that her face turned red. The baby had rib fractures. When he got that urge, he even pushed his index finger all the way down the child's throat. There was also bruising on the child's private parts. Can you believe this? Now another one, this is Indian parents in Norway. They were charged with gross or repeated maltreatment because they were found guilty of burning and hitting the child with a belt. They used to threaten the child that they would send him to India if he wet his pants. And the Norwegian authorities said that the child had burn marks and scars on his body. In fact, there was a UNICEF study on Indian parents, and they found out that Indian parents use 30 different kinds of abuse on kids from 0 to 6 years. There was physical violence like burning, pinching, slapping. There was verbal abuse, a lot of blaming, criticizing, and the child witnessed physical violence, which is one parent being violent to another or towards their sibling or someone outside the family. And then there was emotional abuse, restricting movement, denying food, discrimination, instilling fear, etc. I shared all of these so that everybody can realize that yes, most parents love their children or want to do the best, but then there are parents who have their own mental health issues, who have their own antisocial traits. They can cause severe child abuse. So the basic idea here is that children also have rights. If anybody has rights, children have rights too, because again, rights are made up for well-being of the population. In fact, UNICEF has laid down some rights of children, and this is the child version, and I suggest that everybody, including their children, should read this. Look at some of these rights. No discrimination. When adults make decisions, they should think about how their decisions will affect children. Every child has the right to be alive. This needs to be said. Children have the right to their own identity. Children have the right to give their opinions freely on issues that affect them, and so on. Total, there are 54 rights included in this convention. The government needs to take action and take the children away. Basically, in the cases where these rights are violated in some extreme manner. But then a question arises, aren't institutions or foster care worse though? See, typically we are all horrified at the thought of institutionalization or foster families because the thoughts come, oh, who will really care for them? It will never be as good as living in the family. The children might end up on streets. So let's understand the negative effects on the brain from institutionalization or foster families. So let's start with institutions. So one thing is clear, that institutional environments are harmful for healthy physical and psychological development, especially for young children. Because in many institutions, the number of children are very high and the number of caregivers are less. So children are often left alone. They don't really get that one-on-one attention and their schedules are very regimented. The children don't get that human interaction bonding in that age, which is very necessary for them. And the consequences of these rearing conditions often include physical growth restriction, a wide range of behavioral problems, and deficits in cognitive function compared to children raised in families. Now let's look at foster families. Now, according to research, the effects of foster family are pretty different. And here the idea is, if the child is placed in a foster family at a very young age, that is before 2 years, and the environment that they get is pretty stable, then it promotes really healthy normal development of the child. You should think foster families like just adoption. If the parents really want a child, if they have the resources and the time to actually care for the child, and the child does get an environment where they are loved, cared for, they get attention, then it's actually pretty healthy. So don't just assume that foster family would be inferior. But despite that, the threshold for moving children from a family to a foster family must be very high. You can't just do it casually. And if the government does take the children away, they are very much answerable for every care order that they give. They have to justify that the benefit to the child and the society is much higher than the cost that they are putting on the family. And no matter how developed or morally progressed you are always answerable. Now I'll give you my verdict on Norway. So after watching the movie, people are very angry with Norway as a country also. Like, what is happening there? What are you doing? The movie leaves you with this feeling that Norway is this unsafe place to raise children, like especially for immigrants. And also the country seems so corrupt, illogical, and heartless. The movie creates such a negative perception about Norway, but my view is different. First of all, I want to mention that the movie did seem biased to me. It seemed like a very one-sided depiction. Even the character portrayal didn't seem fair. Like, all the people in the Norway government and the child welfare services, they were portrayed as these cold, evil people. Like, they had this constant evil laugh or smirk, like no warmth at all. And all of their reasons were also diminished, and they just highlighted the theory about their corruption. They even indicated that child welfare services, it could be linked to some child trafficking, that children from foster families end up there as if they are involved in it, which is a wild accusation. Overall, I thought it was irresponsible filmmaking because you're generating hate towards a whole country. This movie seemed like hearing a story from a friend when they talk about their fight with their wife. In that fight, your friend pretty much didn't make any mistake, and every small mistake from the wife is made out to be the biggest crime. And another point here is that this movie is based on a book which was written by the mother who went through all of this, Sagarika. So all of the movie, whatever we see, this is actually the story from one side. She may have downplayed their reasons and exaggerated her own pain. And maybe she left out some of her own real mistakes. How would we know? Can we ask Norway? No, we cannot. Because they also have a policy of confidentiality. Norwegian child welfare services cannot participate in public debates of single cases. So basically, anybody can say whatever they want. They won't respond because they are respecting the confidentiality of that case. So unless you take them to court, you really would not be able to hear their side. Now, I totally agree that Norway may really have made some genuine mistakes. First one is, of course, the mistake of over strictness, and which I think it clearly made that mistake because so many professionals have also said the same thing, that they are just too harsh. Even Norwegian public thinks so. It's like a teacher trying to teach punctuality to the children, trying to maintain decorum of the class, but if a child comes, let's say 5 minutes late, the teacher suspends the child for a week. Now, punctuality is desirable, but this punishment is too harsh. So even for Norway, their intention is right. They want to save children, but their solutions may be too harsh. And another unconscious mistake that they may have made is the mistake of perverse incentives. And this I'm actually not sure of. I'm only going by the movie. And this relates to the corruption charges on them. So what is a perverse incentive? It is an incentive that has unintended and undesirable results that is contrary to the intentions of the designers. There's a very interesting story behind this, the original Cobra effect. This is based on an anecdote that happened in India during British rule. So the British government was concerned that the number of venomous cobras was increasing in Delhi. So they were trying to think of a solution, and they thought, how about we give an incentive to people? If you kill a cobra, we'll give you money. Initially, the strategy was very successful. People killed a large number of snakes because they were getting the reward. However, people quickly realized that this is a great way to earn money. So they started breeding cobras, because the more cobras you breed, the more money you can earn. And when the government got to know about this, they of course stopped the scheme. And now all the people who were breeding cobras, their snakes suddenly became worthless. So they set them free and the cobra population increased. So the intention was right, but ultimately the effect was adverse. So in this case, we see that the government is actually allotting a lot of money for the care of children who have been taken away from the families, right? So the intention is right, but because the money is only allotted once the child is removed from a family, this may incentivize people in the system to actually remove the child so that they can get the money. Now this is a perverse incentive. Every country, every culture will have their own unique flaws, mistakes, their own unique weaknesses. But I want you to be beware of your emotions and generalizations based on single stories, strong stories. When you watch a movie like this, it creates such anger in you that you might end up completely hating Norway. And I'm cautioning you, do not submit to irrational hate or fear. If you want to make an opinion about a whole culture or a population or any phenomena, don't rely on single stories or anecdotes. Focus on larger trends. Focus on bigger data, and that too from every angle. And if you focus on the data, that is clearly good for Norway, as we saw earlier. So I would say Norway is still an amazing country to live in. Overall, it's one of the best places in the world. But of course, Barneverne may need some reform. So my personal opinion is that general is good, but there could be problems in the specific things. And technically, fixing specific problems is an infinite journey. No matter how much you progress morally, you will still find things to improve on. So when you see flaws in others, don't hate. Try to empathize, understand, and maybe offer solutions. And if Barneverne ever listens to this video, I hope you take this critical feedback from everybody else and me and reflect on the reasonableness of your care orders. Shridhar Life School now specializes in relationship counseling. We start with an in-depth checkup or assessment of your relationship, your strong and weak areas. Now, based on that, our therapists will help you using world-class techniques and interventions, which have been developed after decades of research in marital therapy. It's always better if both partners come for counseling, but if for some reason your partner is unable to join, you can definitely start on your own. To book sessions, visit our website shridharlifeschool.com.